My wife mocked my childhood trauma. In front of friends, so I played her secrets out loud and left her screaming. In front of everyone, I'm a 33-year-old guy, and I used to think my wife, Hannah, was the safest person I could ever open up to. For most of my life, safety was a foreign concept. I grew up in a house that looked normal from the outside. White fence, trimmed lawn, smiling photos, but inside, it was chaos. My father drank until he forgot who he was, and my mother's version of love was silence. Whenever I cried, she'd say, "Stop being weak. You're just like your father." Eventually, I learned to swallow everything, pain, fear, sadness, until I couldn't tell one from the other. When I met Hannah at 28, it was like someone turned the lights back on. She had this calm presence that made me want to talk, to finally unload everything I'd buried for decades. I remember the first night I told her about my dad, how he once threw a plate across the room and made me clean up the shards while he laughed. She didn't flinch or pity me. She just held my hand and said, "You didn't deserve that. You were a kid." Those 5 words broke something open in me. I cried in front of her for the first time, and she didn't pull away. She encouraged me to go to therapy, even helped me find a counselor. Whenever I came home drained after a session, she'd make tea and say, "Tell me what came up today." For the first time in my life, I felt seen, safe, loved without conditions. I thought, maybe this is what healing looks like. I used to watch her fall asleep beside me, thinking I'd finally found the one person who'd never use my pain against me. I had no idea then that the same woman who held me through my nightmares would one day turn them into jokes. At first, life with Hannah felt like something out of a quiet, healing dream. We'd spend Sunday mornings making pancakes while the radio played old love songs, and for a while, I actually believed peace was permanent. But looking back now, I see the first cracks forming. Subtle, easy to miss, like hairline fractures in glass. It started with harmless teasing. She'd say things like, "You're too nice for your own good," or "You overthink everything." I'd laugh, not realizing she was slowly learning where to press. I remember one night after therapy, I told her how proud I was for finally confronting my father in a session, even just in my mind. She smirked and said, "So you cried again, huh?" It sounded like a joke, but her tone was sharp, mocking. I brushed it off, told myself she was just tired, stressed from work. "She loves me," I repeated quietly like a prayer. But something inside me twisted, uneasy. Over the next few months, her sarcasm grew more casual. In front of friends, she'd say things like, "Don't ask him to choose a movie. He'll overanalyze it like his therapy sessions." And everyone would laugh. My chest would tighten, but I smiled along because that's what I'd been trained to do. Survive discomfort quietly. One night, as we were cleaning up after dinner, I finally said, "Hey, can you not make fun of me like that? It kind of hurts." She rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, you're so sensitive. It's just a joke. You really need to learn to lighten up." Her words hit harder than I expected. The way she said sensitive made me feel small again, like that kid my parents used to belittle. That night, as she slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and realized something terrifying. Maybe love doesn't always mean safety, and maybe I'd trusted the wrong person with my scars. The first real blow came at a dinner party. There were 6 of us, close friends, wine glasses half full, laughter echoing across the table. The air smelled like roasted garlic and red wine, and for a while I let myself relax. I was telling a story about a funny mix-up at work when Hannah cut in, smirking. "You think that's bad? You should have seen him when he cried during Toy Story 3 last month. Like full-on sobbing. I had to pause the movie. Everyone laughed. Hard. I froze. The sound hit me like a punch to the chest. It wasn't the joke itself, it was the look on her face. She enjoyed it. There was pride in her voice, like she'd just exposed a secret I never gave her permission to share. I felt my throat tighten, heat crawling up my neck. I tried to smile, to play along, but my voice cracked when I said, "Yeah." That ending gets me every time. The laughter moved on, but my body didn't. I sat there, barely tasting the food, nodding through conversations I couldn't hear. When we got home, I finally said, "That wasn't funny, Hannah. That really hurt." She didn't even look guilty. "Oh, come on," she said, shrugging. "You cry over everything. It's not like I told them your darkest secret." "That was my secret," I said quietly. "You made me feel like a joke." She sighed, exasperated. "You're too dramatic. If you can't laugh at yourself, maybe you shouldn't share so much." I slept on the couch that night. Not because we fought, but because I couldn't stand the sound of her breathing beside me. That was the moment something inside me began to shift. The safety I once felt around her had started to rot into shame. And deep down, a voice whispered what I refused to believe. She's becoming just like them. After that night, something changed in me. And in her. I stopped sharing as much, but she started digging more, like she missed the control my vulnerability gave her. Every time I opened up even a little, she twisted it into a joke later, or used it during arguments like ammunition she'd been saving. It wasn't just the words. It was how she enjoyed watching me crumble. If I came home quiet after therapy, she'd grin and say, "What? Did your therapist tell you your daddy issues are still unresolved?" If I flinched when someone yelled in a restaurant, she'd lean in and whisper, "You're not a little boy anymore, babe. Relax." At first, I told myself she didn't mean harm. I wanted so badly to believe that love couldn't coexist with cruelty. But her tone grew sharper, her jokes more deliberate. When I'd try to explain how it made me feel, she'd twist it around. "So now I can't even talk? You're always the victim, aren't you?" "No, God, I feel like I can't even breathe around you without it becoming a therapy session." That word, therapy, turned into her favorite weapon. She started calling me Dr. Feelings in front of her friends. Once, she even told them I cried more than her niece. Every laugh that followed chipped away at something sacred inside me. One night, I asked her why she did it. I just needed to hear something that made sense. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Because it's exhausting pretending you're not broken." That line shattered me. I stood there in the kitchen, holding a mug that had gone cold in my hand, realizing I'd built my entire sense of safety around someone who saw my healing as weakness. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling like I was back in that childhood home, silenced, cornered, unseen. But this time, I wasn't a child anymore. And something inside me started whispering, "You don't have to stay." It all came crashing down one Friday night at a small dinner Hannah organized for our close friends. The house smelled of rosemary and steak. Candles flickered on the table. Soft music played from the speaker. For a few fleeting moments, it felt like the warmth we once had might come back. I even caught myself smiling as we toasted to good company. But then Hannah reached for her wine, smirked, and said, "You guys ever hear how he used to hide in closets as a kid whenever his dad yelled? He thought the monsters were real." The laughter that followed felt slow, distorted, like time itself had turned cruel. My chest went hollow. My therapist once told me that trauma memories can come back not as images, but as sensations. I felt that now. The chill of a concrete floor, my father's footsteps, the taste of dust. I stared at Hannah, who was laughing louder than anyone else. For a moment, I didn't see my wife. I saw every person who had ever enjoyed my pain. "Stop it," I muttered, my voice shaking. She waved me off. "Relax, it's just a story." "No," I said louder this time. "It's my story." The room went still. Her friends stared at their plates, unsure what to do. I excused myself, went outside, and just stood in the cold night air, breathing like I was drowning. When she came out later, she wasn't apologetic. She was annoyed. "You embarrassed me," she hissed. I laughed bitterly. "You humiliated me." "Oh, for God's sake, you're overreacting again," she snapped, storming inside. That was the night something inside me broke completely. I realized I wasn't living with a partner anymore. I was living with an audience that loved to watch me bleed. And in that moment, standing under the dim porch light, I made a quiet promise to myself. The next time she turned my pain into entertainment, I'd make sure the audience saw who she really was. After that dinner, I stopped trying to defend myself. Something inside me had gone quiet. Not out of weakness, but clarity. I realized that every time I explained my pain, Hannah treated it like another performance. So I gave her silence instead, and silence, I discovered, unnerved her more than any argument ever could. She began poking at it, testing my boundaries like a child pressing on a bruise. "Oh, come on," she'd say, waving a hand. "Are we really doing the moody silent treatment?" Sometimes she'd pout, other times she'd mock, but I stayed calm, detached, watching her like someone studying a storm through glass. I started journaling every conversation, word for word. My therapist encouraged it, saying, "Document the patterns. You'll start to see the truth in black and white." And he was right. I noticed how she always circled back to control, how every apology came with a twist of blame. "I'm sorry you're so sensitive. I didn't mean it like that. You make everything heavy." One evening, she found my journal on the counter. "What's this?" she asked. "My notes," I said simply. "Notes about what?" "About us." She laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "You're actually writing about our fights? That's insane." "Maybe," I said, "but at least it's honest." She walked away, muttering something about playing victim. But I didn't follow her. I was done chasing closure from someone who fed on my vulnerability. In therapy, my counselor asked, "What do you want, truly?" And I said, "Peace, not revenge. Just peace." But when I said it, I felt a sting of dishonesty. Because deep down, I did want her to understand the damage she caused, to feel it, if only for a moment. That's when the idea took root. Not a wild, angry impulse, but a calm, deliberate seed. If she wants an audience, I'll give her one. And this time, she'd be the one on display. It happened by accident. At least, that's what I tell myself when I replay that night. I was backing up files on our shared laptop, clearing space for her endless collection of photos, when I noticed a folder buried inside another labeled Taxes. It was filled with audio files, voice notes. Curiosity got the better of me. The first one was harmless, her venting about a work project. But the next stopped me cold. It was her voice, brittle and mocking. "I swear, if he brings up his childhood one more time, I'm going to lose it. He acts like he's the only person who's ever had a hard life." Laughter followed, hers and someone else's. Another clip. "He thinks therapy makes him deep. It just makes him predictable." Then another, her voice lower now, confessional. "Sometimes I wonder what it'd be like to be with someone stronger, someone who doesn't fall apart every time I tease him." I sat there frozen, the glow of the laptop painting the room in pale blue light. I should have closed it, should have deleted everything and walked away. But I didn't. I kept listening until I reached one that changed everything. She was talking to her best friend, giggling as she said, "You remember that guy I hooked up with after our wedding? The one from work? Sometimes I still think about texting him. But don't worry, I keep my husband distracted with his therapy drama." My breath caught. I replayed it twice just to be sure I wasn't hallucinating. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was physical, deliberate, and cruelly casual. The woman I thought had saved me from my past had been dragging me through a new kind of hell. I didn't yell. I didn't smash the laptop or confront her. Instead, I saved the files, renamed them, and moved them to my phone. I sat there in silence, listening to her laugh echo through the speakers like a ghost. And that's when I knew. She had turned my pain into entertainment. Now, it was her turn to hear herself perform. From that night on, I moved through our home like a ghost. Quiet, deliberate, calculating. Every smile I gave her was rehearsed. Every kiss goodnight was strategy. She thought she still had control, that I was retreating into my usual silence. But what she didn't realize was that my silence had turned into planning. A few weeks later, Hannah announced she wanted to host a classy little dinner with our closest friends. "It's been tense lately," she said, pretending concern. "I think we could use a fun night, you know. Reset the energy." I nodded, hiding a small smile. "Yeah," I said softly. "Let's make it memorable." Over the next few days, I played the role of perfect husband. I cleaned the house, cooked, even bought her favorite wine. She seemed pleased, maybe even a little smug, thinking she'd finally tamed my resentment. What she didn't know was that while she was at work, I was editing her voice recordings. stringing together every cruel word, every confession, every laugh at my expense. I layered the clips over soft background music, the same playlist she always used for dinner parties. It sounded normal enough until you actually listened. I named the file Dinner Mix and synced it to the Bluetooth speaker. My hands didn't shake when I did it. I didn't feel rage or sadness, just an eerie calm. For years, she'd dictated how my story was told, mocking, twisting, narrating my pain as a joke. Now, she was going to listen to her own story. On the night of the dinner, as she got ready in our bedroom, I watched her from the doorway. She was humming, radiant in her confidence. "How do I look?" she asked, spinning playfully. I smiled. "Perfect," I said. And I meant it. She looked exactly like the woman who had underestimated the man she thought she'd broken. As I walked into the kitchen to set the speaker by the table, I caught my reflection in the window. I looked peaceful, because for the first time, I knew the ending. And she was about to hear it too. The night of the dinner felt surreal. Everything looked perfect. Our dining room glowed under soft amber lights, wine glasses gleamed, and laughter floated easily. Hannah was in her element, animated and charming, basking in the admiration of her friends. She had no idea the stage she'd built was about to become her undoing. I played my part well. I smiled, poured drinks, cracked a few jokes. She teased me in front of everyone again, saying, "Don't let him handle the grill. He'll start analyzing the coals like his therapist analyzes his feelings." The table erupted in laughter. This time, though, the sting didn't reach me. I simply smiled and said, "You're right, Hannah. I do overanalyze things." Then I reached for my phone under the table and hit play. At first, no one noticed the change. The background music drifted softly, the same mellow playlist she always used. Then came her voice, recorded, crisp, unmistakable. "He acts like he's the only one who's ever had a hard life." A ripple of confusion spread across the table. Someone frowned. Another looked at Hannah. Her smile faltered, eyes darting toward the speaker. The next line hit harder. "Sometimes I wonder what it'd be like to be with someone stronger." And then her laugh, sharp, cruel, echoing through the room. "Don't worry, I keep my husband distracted with his therapy drama." The chatter died. Forks froze midair. Hannah's hand trembled around her wine glass. "What is this?" she demanded, forcing a laugh. I looked at her evenly. "Dinner music," I said quietly. Her face drained of color as the final clip played, her confessing to cheating after our wedding, mocking my pain. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. Every friend at that table saw her for who she truly was, and as her trembling fingers reached to shut off the speaker, I stood slowly, calm, and deliberate. Because the show wasn't over yet, Hannah lunged for the speaker, fumbling with the buttons, her face flushed crimson. "This is twisted," she yelled, her voice cracking. But the recording kept playing, her own laughter echoing through the room like a cruel ghost she couldn't silence. Her friends stared, wide-eyed and speechless. The sound of her voice filled every corner of the dining room, each sentence more damning than the last. "I only married him because he worships me. He's easy to control," the recording said. Gasps spread around the table. One of her friends whispered, "Oh my God," while another shifted uncomfortably, clearly trying to disappear into their chair. Hannah spun toward me, her eyes wild. "How dare you invade my privacy like this?" I didn't move. "You mean the same way you invaded mine? Every time you mocked my past, my pain, in front of everyone?" Her lips quivered, but I could see the calculation behind her tears. She wasn't sorry. She was cornered. "This is insane," she stammered. "You're making me look like a monster." I stepped closer, voice low but steady. "You didn't need my help for that." The room felt thick, the air buzzing with tension. She tried to spin it. "He's twisting everything. He's unstable." But her own words had already burned the truth into the walls. I turned toward our guests, who were too stunned to speak. "I'm sorry you had to hear this," I said softly. "But I wanted everyone to finally understand what I've been living with." Then I looked at Hannah one last time. "You took the safest parts of me and turned them into punchlines." You used my trauma as your entertainment. So tonight, I returned the favor. She screamed my name as I picked up my coat and walked toward the door, but I didn't look back. Behind me, I heard the clatter of the wine glass she threw, the muffled sob that followed, the stunned whispers of friends realizing who she really was. And for the first time in years, the sound didn't hurt me. It set me free. I didn't go home that night. I didn't even pack a bag. I just drove until the lights of the city faded into the dark stretch of highway, the silence in my car louder than any fight we'd ever had. For the first time in years, I didn't feel trapped. I didn't feel the need to explain myself or fix what she broke. I just existed, breathing, free. By morning, my phone was flooded with messages. From her friends, even her mother. Hannah's texts swung between rage and desperation. You humiliated me in front of everyone. Followed by, we can fix this if you just talk to me. Then, I'll tell everyone you abused me if you don't come back. That last one made me realize there was never love underneath her control. Only fear disguised as intimacy. I blocked her number. Filed for divorce a week later. When the papers were served, she sent one final message through a friend. You ruined me. I didn't reply. She wasn't ruined. She was simply seen. Maybe for the first time in her life. The people who had once laughed at her jokes about me slowly distanced themselves. Two of her closest friends reached out privately to apologize, saying they'd had no idea how cruel she'd been. I didn't respond to most messages. I didn't want pity. I wanted peace. For a while, I stayed at a small apartment on the edge of town. Just me, a mattress on the floor, and silence. It was strange, that quiet, but it wasn't the kind that smothered. It was the kind that healed. I started going to therapy twice a week, not because I was broken, but because I wanted to understand why I'd tolerated being made small for so long, and every session brought the same realization. Sometimes walking away isn't revenge. It's reclamation, and mine had just begun. Months passed, and life slowly started to feel real again. I moved into a small one-bedroom place with creaky floors and sunlight that spilled through the curtains every morning. It wasn't much, but it was mine. No eggshells, no tension hiding in laughter, no sharp words disguised as jokes. Just quiet, the kind that didn't demand anything from me. Therapy became less about survival and more about rebuilding. My therapist once said, "You've spent your whole life trying to earn peace from people who never intended to give it to you." That line stuck with me. For so long, I'd mistaken tolerance for love, endurance for strength. But real strength, I learned, isn't about withstanding pain. It's about refusing to live in it. Sometimes I still think about that night. The look on Hannah's face when she realized her own words were echoing back at her. People ask if I regret what I did, exposing her like that. I don't. It wasn't revenge. It was revelation. She spent years turning my pain into performance, and all I did was give her the stage she asked for. The truth performed itself. One evening, I found an old photo of us, from our honeymoon. She's laughing, and I'm looking at her like she hung the stars. For a moment, I almost missed that version of her. But then I realized I was really missing the version of me who believed he was safe. That man deserved better. Now, when I wake up, I don't flinch at silence. I don't apologize for my feelings. I don't measure my worth by someone else's comfort. I sit by the window with my coffee, watching the city come alive, and I think, maybe peace isn't something you find. Maybe it's something you finally stop running from. And as the morning light hits my face, I whisper to myself, not as a victim, but as a survivor. She didn't destroy me. She revealed me,